What is up, embodied women? Oh my goodness. I have another juicy guest speaker in store for you guys today. This is a part of the Embodied Coach series. So again, I love to highlight and give a mic and a stage to my embodied coaches so they can share their mission and their purpose and their work in this world. So today I have with me the incredible Kathryn Ward. Kathryn graduated August-ish, graduated the Embodied Coach in August, and she's going to be speaking her magic with you today. So hello, my love. Welcome to the stage.
Hello, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Me too. And I just want to start off by saying, like, this has been the third podcast that you've manifested. I heard that in your stories today. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny because at the beginning of the year, I really wanted community collaboration and I just put it out there. I wanted to be on like one podcast and it was just like one after the other. So I'm like very excited to be able to use my voice, my throat chakra, and be able to, get that message out to other people.
Yeah. Oh, well, this is the space to do it. I know they're going to absolutely love you. So, why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about who you are, the work that you do, and some backstory on how you got into doing this work?
Yeah, so I guess at the very like high level of it, I'm a psychic medium, an intuitive coach, but I'm also a Reiki healer. I am an intuitive teacher, all these other things, but I like to just go with psychic medium because that's easiest. And I guess I really like started off probably like 2 or 3 years ago now, where I was not in touch with spirituality at all. Right. I didn't, spirituality to me was all woo woo stuff. I grew up on the East Coast in a very Catholic family. And I was just in this place where I was really like unhappy, stuck, unmotivated. And I didn't know exactly what that was. And I thought it was completely like normal to feel, which it is. But I thought that everyone just always felt stuck. Right. And that's when I really started to get into spirituality. I started to learn about manifesting. That really was my first go at it. And then with astrology, shadow work, all of these things. And I was like, oh man, this is why I'm not happy. And you start like uncovering those shadows, uncovering all of the things that your parents, society has been telling you. And that's when I realized that my whole life I had been living this life that was planned out for me, right? My parents were telling me what I should do. I'm the youngest of all of my cousins, so it was always like following in their footsteps. They've already got it figured out. And by the time I was in my early 20s, I was so unfulfilled because I wasn't living life for me. Right. And that's when I found out that, or discovered that I was in this job that even though I was super successful in, looking on the outside, looking in, I was killing it. I was so unhappy, burnt out. I was in a really toxic relationship that, again, I thought was completely normal, living in a place that I really didn't like. And that's when I decided to, really go into therapy and figure out what was going on, what I was feeling, and figure out the way through it. And that's when I completely transformed my life, really started developing my intuition. I was always into, witches and stuff like that growing up. So figuring out that I was a medium was like crazy to me. So I dove like headfirst into all of that. And that helped me, figure out that I wanted to move to California. So I got a new job, moved to California, and basically started this whole new life out in San Diego.
Wow. Wow, I love that I mean, I didn't know how similar and aligned our journeys were. Like I knew they were obviously aligned in some ways, but I didn't know that you two were working at like a corporate job that you were just like, holy crap, like how is this life? Like there has to be more. Yeah, and I think that everyone listening to this has experienced that feeling of like, why do I feel stuck? Is this just how life is supposed to be? Right. And I
Mm-hmm.
think both of us can say that, like, no, it's not how life is supposed to be. There's so much more to life than just feeling stuck and burnt out and misaligned. So, I just love that so much. So, what was like the main thing that was like the catalyst to pursuing this work? Like, wow, I'm a medium. Holy shit, how did this happen? And then like, now serving people with that work?
Yeah. So I think the biggest trigger in my journey was definitely the relationship that I was in. Again, I said it was really toxic. There was tons of gaslighting there. And, when you're an intuitive person, things are going on, but you're being gaslit. Like that's how your intuition shuts down. So I
Mhm.
thought, I was crazy, all these things. And then that relationship really just crumbled. And that's when I started going to therapy. And I was like, holy shit, I was right. I knew all of these things. Like I'm intuitive, like just going through that. And then just through different Facebook groups, learning from different platforms, I was like, oh, damn, like I'm intuitive. And that's when I actually hired a coach and I started like this basically like intuition introduction course. And one day my coach was like, do you know you're a medium? And I was like, what are you talking about? She was like, oh, do you see like dead people essentially? And I was like, I mean, no. But then I started explaining it to her and she was like, yeah, you're a medium. Go try it out. Go do some readings and come back. And, I was able to connect so easily. And I was like, oh, wow, this is something I had like always wanted to do. And as soon as I found out that I was medium, I was able to connect. I got all that confirmation. I really just dove in head first, started offering readings in the Facebook groups I was in. I started my business Instagram and, I was doing readings for like $15 or something like that just to like practice. And it
Yeah.
was just so exciting to get the confirmation and also being able to help people.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Being able to help people, being of service, like that's it, I feel like everyone's purpose in some way, shape, or form. It just looks differently for everyone. Um, but okay, question. Was that Jessica who was like,
No,
no, okay.
it was funny. So this was a medium that I just followed on Instagram, and I
Uh-huh.
actually had a dream that she was teaching me how to like talk to people who have passed. This was like a year before she opened this course.
Yeah.
And I messaged her. I was like, I'm supposed to be in this course. I had a dream about it. And she was like, oh my God. Yeah. So then it was that. And then as soon as I was done with that course, that's when I found Jess.
Wow. Wow.
Mhm.
So just some backstory, guys. You're like, who's Jess? Who's Jessica? Jessica is an embodied coach who referred Kathryn into the embodied coach. She is also a intuitive and psychic medium. And so yeah, I was just like, oh my God. Like I was like, of course. Of course. She was like, girl, go read some cards. But okay, so cool. Got it.
No, but Jess was definitely part of that, really owning being intuitive and being a psychic medium and overcoming a lot of, the stigma around it. Especially, like I said, my family is very Catholic. They're very East Coast, very traditional.
Yeah.
And coming out to them as like coming out to them as intuitive, as a psychic medium was so scary. And that really prevented me from really, stepping into who I was.
Yeah.
So that was a big part of my journey that she had helped me with.
Beautiful. So cool. And something that I see in common in so many of our lives, like a lot of my guest speakers, is almost so much of it started with a heartbreak. And my journey did, like having my heart completely shattered and my life, like the rug was just like swiped out from underneath me. And it's almost like that sort of pain cracks you open and
Mhm.
leads you to a deeper sense of purpose and life. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, 100%. And like what I'm thinking about is like you have this idea of how things are supposed to be and what your family, what your friends are telling you you're supposed to want. And when that completely crumbles, you're like, okay, well, I guess I wasn't supposed to want that. But what am I supposed to want? Right.
Yes. Yep. Okay. Well, that leads to like the main topic of our conversation today, the importance of growing your intuition, right?
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. If you want to relate it back to your own story of like how growing your intuition has completely changed your life and how it can change their lives, I'm just going to like give you the mic and I'm just going to absorb it.
I think that the first thing to like know is that we're all intuitive, right? We all have these um abilities. We're all receiving information from spirit, God, universe, whatever you believe in, but we're not taught to really like know how to decipher any of that, right? Like we're taught how to read and write in school, but we're not taught how to use these like next level of your senses. That's how I teach my students. It's like, like what feeling is like, what seeing is like, but what's like the next level of that? And that's really your intuitive abilities. And for me personally, ignoring my intuitive abilities led to extreme anxiety, extreme stress. So, getting these downloads, one, not knowing what they are, or having these feelings that things are happening, but not knowing how to back them up, it just feels like you're totally out of your body. You don't know what to do. And it's almost paralyzing. And that's how I experienced it, right? I had extreme anxiety and I didn't even know that I did, right? Until I decided that I was going to go down this path. So I think that's the first thing. Like, we all have forms of anxiety, and a lot of times it's because you're intuitive and you have no idea like what to do with yourself.
So true. Yeah. And just to like speak to that for a moment, and the listeners know this, when I was at my corporate job, I had so much anxiety to the point that I couldn't take a deep breath. Like I literally, like it felt like there was something on my lungs and I couldn't fill up my lungs with air. And looking back, it was my intuition being like, get the fuck out of this place. Like you're not supposed to be here.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny that you say that because I didn't even really know what taking a deep breath was. Right? Like, I'm doing this work and they're like, take a deep breath. I'm like, what do you mean?
Yeah, fill up my lungs. What?
Yeah. So that's like the first step of it is like, I started to realize I was like anxious. I was always scared of things happening. And part of it was obviously like my parents, like being hyper alert of things and telling me to do that. But also part of it was like, I have all of this information, but I have nothing to do with it. Like, there's no output of it. Right. So just like going through therapy and realizing, I'm an empath, I'm highly sensitive, like all of these buzzwords, but really what does that mean? That means you're intuitive, right? And I was very lucky that my therapist was spiritual. So when I brought these ideas up to her, she was like, maybe you are intuitive, like maybe you are a medium, all these things. So I was very lucky. And it was obviously, divine timing that I found a therapist that was like that, who really encouraged these things to
Yeah.
me.
That's so special because it is hard to come by in a lot of ways. And I also think that because you didn't know at that point that you were an intuitive, right? And
Correct. I was just like suspect of it.
yeah. So like let that you guys be a sign of like following the breadcrumbs, like every single step you take is leading you to a life of more alignment if you keep following the breadcrumbs, if you keep listening to that inner knowing.
Mm-hmm.
And so something that's been so alive in my life is when I went through that breakup, my mom took me to see a psychic. And I didn't really know what to expect or anything, but she basically was like, "What do you want?" And I was like, "I want to go to England and I just want to go and book the flight." She's like, "Well, why aren't you?" And I was like, "Because I'm afraid I'll never come back." And now I'm like realizing how the booking of the flight to England, by the way, which I just did, right? 4 years later. But in a lot of ways, it was representative of quitting my job, right?
Mm-hmm.
And not going back. So like just continuing to like follow those signs, right? And like, oh, okay, like for Kathryn, it was, oh, I gotta somehow by some divine intervention, you got a therapist who was very spiritual, like
Mm-hmm.
it was all leading you to this path.
Yes, 100%. So being able to confide in her really, made me seek out other people to learn from. So it was like through different channels that I was getting a reading from this other medium who eventually became one of my mentors. She gave me a reading. She was like, you're a medium, right? And I was like, I am? Like, really? She was like, "Yeah, I'll help you like develop your skills." And she's like my mom. She's like my spiritual mom, I call her. But yeah, I would call her. I'll be like, "This happened today. Was that supernatural? Was that spiritual? Or is that me being crazy?" Right? Because you need, like, as an intuitive and you're just learning, you need that confirmation to be like, "Yes, you're on the right track." All of these things. And that's when I really started to pick up tarot. Like, tarot is one of my main offerings because it's such a tangible way to use your intuition, right? Like, the cards have meanings. You ask a question, you pull the cards, you interpret them as you can, and it's so tangible, especially to the sitter. who's there. So that's like really how I began to test my intuition, giving these card readings, being like, I feel like maybe you're having a tough time with your boyfriend or something like that. And they're like, how did you know that? I'm like, this card means this, and that's how I knew it, right? And it's kind of a nice out as like you're developing your intuition, right? And then when I started to get comfortable with that, that's when I was like, okay, I need like an actual coach. I need to figure out how, like, exercises, different modalities, stuff like that. And
Yeah.
that's when I really started to use intuition in like my daily life.
Yeah.
So that's when I was realizing, okay, well, I feel stuck in my job because I hate being here because it's not aligned with me anymore, right? It's not aligned with my morals, what I desire, all these things. So I'm being pushed to go somewhere else. Well, where do I want to go? And I was like, I don't know where I want to go, but I want to get as far away from here as possible, right?
Yeah.
And that was California for me because I was in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, applying to jobs in California, something will hit. And as soon as I did that, got a job interview, went through that process and got the job. Like it was almost too easy, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And something I want to pull out of that too, that I think was so important for the listeners to hear and let land is like when you are developing your intuition, it's almost like, I mean, it's not necessary, but it's almost like a non-negotiable in a lot of ways to have a mentor because it sounds like from what I heard, having a mentor was almost like giving you and teaching you permission to trust yourself.
Mm. Yes, exactly. And it's really funny because in one of the Facebook groups I'm in, this girl says that she's blocked with her intuition. And everyone in the comments were like, get a coach, find out why you're blocked, right? Because you don't believe yourself. That's like why you're saying you're blocked. So
Yeah.
if it's not like a teacher or a mentor, like having a friend who's going through like the same thing, like having so many friends that are on the same um path as me, and being able to be like, okay, well, I just pulled these cards. Like, you do a card reading over there and see if you can confirm what I'm saying or feel into this. Am I off? Something like that. So definitely, community is crucial when you're developing your intuition, I think.
So good. And how do people usually get blocked with their intuition?
I think it's just a lot of fear and doubt, right? Because I think the first thing is like intuition is still such a woo woo thing, even though so many people are like, oh no, my intuition just told me that, stuff like that. But I'll say something and someone could be like, absolutely not. That's not going to happen. You're like, oh, well, shit. Like, am I really that off? Even though that person has like no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Right. It's so easy because we rely on people so much for other things. For if someone says you're wrong, you're like, oh shit, I'm not intuitive. I'm not this. I'm just going to stop.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh my gosh. Okay, this is actually so good. I'm so happy we're talking about this because first of all, you guys, like take back your power and stop relying on external validation, right? You're a self-validating woman who knows her fucking shit, right? But something else that it just kind of came up when you were speaking. I watched this TikTok around a girl who took an Uber, quote unquote, it was a fake Uber, but like she could tell that she was about to get kidnapped.
Mm,
And she sat with, should I say something and try to get out, or should I just let this happen? And the reason why she was like, do I just let this happen is because she was always taught to be polite,
mm,
right? And who can resonate with that? Like, I mean, maybe it's not that extreme, but like just that, oh, I shouldn't speak my mind, or I shouldn't say what I want to say, or I shouldn't go do what I want to do, or I shouldn't, speak up, whatever, because of the fear of what people will think, or the fear of being too much, whatever the case. And it's just interesting because I think a lot of women shun inner knowing, that intuition, because they just don't want to be mean, and they want everyone to love them. They want to be accepted.
yeah, 100%. And something that you said before that story is your intuition, really being in tune with it, it makes you more confident, right? Because you don't need you like I was saying, you need like the external validation as you're learning, but once you're in tune, you don't need someone to tell you, oh yeah, you're on the right path, right? Like, I like to get readings too, but I don't have to get a reading every day to know if this guy that I'm talking to is good for me or if this is the job I should take, stuff like that, right? It makes you more confident, it makes you less codependent, right? And helps you break
Yeah.
away from those relationships that aren't serving you any longer.
Wow. Yeah. And that, I mean, speaking of the importance of intuition right there, right? Like more confidence, more freedom to break free from that codependency. Like it sounds like it can really touch on every corner of someone's life.
Yeah, exactly. And to me, it just helps you navigate life easier, right? Like you were talking about following the breadcrumbs, even knowing what those breadcrumbs are, is a huge step.
Yeah.
And just like trusting, hey, I'm here. I got this, right? I'll figure it out.
Yeah. Oh my God, I just got so happy and excited because you said huge without the H. And that's how my dad says it because he's from the East Coast too. And I just got so happy. I was like, oh my
That's
God.
hilarious. Yeah. All my friends make fun of me.
I love it. No, please. I'm not making fun. I fucking love it so much. Oh, that's so powerful. Okay, so maybe you can go through some tangible steps that someone can just start with developing, growing their intuition.
Yeah. One thing that I love doing, so a question that I always see on TikTok or like when I do lives is like, what does this sign mean? Right? Like people see angel numbers all the time, they see feathers, coins, like whatever it is.
That's me.
What does this mean? And I mean, the truth to the matter is like signs are so specific to the person, right? Like a feather could mean something to you and it could mean something completely different to me.
Yeah.
So really like asking another psychic to tell you what it is kind of useless in my opinion.
Yeah.
Um, but that's one thing that I really like to do. So like if you sit down and you like see this feather, close your eyes, like take some deep breaths. What does this feather mean? Like what is the sign? Who is it from? And just like taking whatever comes in, like if it's that you're on the right path, great. If it's a message from your grandpa, like trust that. Another one that I like to do that's like really tangible, and Jess actually taught this to me, is if you go to like a coffee shop or like a restaurant or something, like sit your back to the door and try to, like, if you hear the door open, try to predict what that person looks like, right? Like, are
Mm.
they man? Are they female? What are they wearing? Just like very high level things, because sometimes you'll be right and you'll be like, damn, like that was so specific. Like, you can't deny it, right? I think that's like a really fun one to play.
Oh my God, you know what you can also do? This is so funny and so random, but oh my God, it's so aligned with the coffee shop practice. So I'm at this bar in Austin, Texas. It's a speakeasy. It's so fun. And like there's this older, kind of creepy-ish man hitting on the female drummer. Like what a badass, right? Of course he's gonna hit on her. And I'm with my group of friends and I go, he looks like a Tim. I don't know why. I just said he looks like a Tim. And then they're like, go find out. I'm like, fine, I'll go find out. So I go up to this guy and I'm like, hey, what's your name again? I've met you before. I totally forget your name. And he goes, oh, like I'm Tim. And I shook his hand and I looked over at my friends and my jaw dropped and they saw the words Tim come out. Like it was just so like, how did I just freaking know that? Right.
Yeah.
But I just knew. There's no other reason. Right. There's no other reason than
Yeah.
I knew.
Yeah. Those
Oh,
things that are just like so inexplainable that like it has to be your intuition.
yeah,
Like it's just so satisfying.
it is. It's so satisfying. So I love those practices. So the first one was tuning into what meaning you're giving the sign.
Mhm.
I love that. And then go to a coffee shop and just like play with your intuition.
Yeah.
So fun.
Yeah. And then you'll realize how you're getting these downloads. Like sometimes it's claircognizance, you just know. Sometimes you actually see it in your mind's eye or you hear something, right? And then you get more familiar with how spirit is communicating with you.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And something that I'd love for you to speak to as well is I use the word downloads a lot, right? Like in my teachings and my being. And deep down, that is intuition, right? Like
Mhm.
it is that inner knowing. So for people who are in business for themselves, which is a majority of the people listening to this, like, can you speak to the downloads that they get?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy because so I'm doing my Reiki master teaching right now. So Reiki is all about making yourself a clear channel to like, get those messages, those downloads. And the things that have been coming through, I'm like, what is this? I've never even thought about it. But those are literally messages from spirit telling you how to make your business successful, right? What path you're supposed to be on. And that's why a lot of people, if they're in business for a long time, that's why their offerings change so often, right? Because like sometimes, like maybe I'm supposed to be doing intuition now, but maybe like next year I'm doing full on just Reiki. And that's just the path that I'm on. And that's why people are able to change because they're really in the flow of it, right? And trusting that direction.
Yeah. And I think that's also a big reason why people get stuck too in their businesses or feel trapped in their businesses is because they're not listening and they're not
Mhm.
adopting and changing and evolving as their intuition is guiding them to.
Yeah, 100%. And just it could be a really far out thing that maybe you don't even know how you would offer it. But if you say, like, yes, I'm open to offering this or exploring this, everything just falls into place, right? Someone reaches out to you, they're like, I'm teaching a class about this. And you're like, oh, okay, this is where I'm supposed to go. Again, like following the breadcrumbs.
Yeah, so powerful. Okay, I wrote something else down here. Um, oh, removing the blocks. So I asked you earlier how people get blocked.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what are some ways, or maybe one specific way that's coming through for you that the person listening to this can lead themselves out of that block?
Yeah. I think the best way to identify a block is what are you scared to do? What makes you uncomfortable, right? Like in my own experience, like I've been working on a lot of throat chakra stuff, like expressing myself, stepping into my truth, stuff like that. So literally everywhere I turn, I'm being challenged with that, right? Someone's
Oh yeah.
challenging me at work, someone's challenging me in my family, all this stuff. And it's really uncomfortable. It makes me really fucking uncomfortable. And I realized after 3 or 4 times of it happening, I was like, "Oh, okay, I'm supposed to do this, right? I'm supposed to voice what I wanna say." So, to identify your block, it's where you feel uncomfortable, right? It's where you want to avoid, it's where you're scared. Going back to, like, shadow work, it's those shadows that you're trying to put to the side,
Yeah.
right? And the way to unblock it is by facing it head on, in my experience, right? And that there's a little bit of shadow work that goes into it as to why you feel uncomfortable, scared, all of those things, but really just like doing it, right? Because I think part of the trust is knowing that, I'll try this and if it doesn't work out, then that's fine. But if it works out, that's fucking awesome,
Yeah.
right? And it's the reward that happens with like getting out of your comfort zone. So I associate blocks for myself like with the chakras. So
Yeah.
like my throat chakra is blocked. Okay, well, where am I not speaking up for myself? Like that's usually a lot of it. Where am I not saying my opinion? Where do I not think my opinion matters? Stuff
Mm,
like that.
yeah.
Right? Or if it's like where do I feel not safe? My root chakra. Okay, well, how do you get back to that inner child healing, all this stuff? So it's a little bit more complex
Yeah.
when you go to the chakras, but I think it's so helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really important to highlight too, of just that like action brings you out of doubt, right?
Hmm.
And neither of us are saying like bypass the shadows. We're just saying like while you're healing the shadows, do the damn thing because you're going to create that confidence within yourself and that trust with yourself.
Yeah. And I mean, the block is essentially stagnant energy, right? That's why you're feeling stuck. That's why feeling all these things. Do something to change it, change the energy,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
It seems like so simple, especially if you're into energetics, but do something a little bit different then if what you're currently doing doesn't work.
Yeah, that's so good. Oh, I love that because I'm so in that too. Oh, 333. And I've been seeing the threes everywhere. It's really true. Like the ability to say like, oh, interesting. I have this shadow, I have this wound, and I'm going to heal it, but I'm also not going to let it stop me in this very moment and to move through it. Sweet spot. So good.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I love it. Okay. So we worked together for 14 weeks inside of the Embodied Coach. And some big shifts came for you during the Embodied Coach to really like help people harness everything that we just spoke about today.
Mhm.
So, why don't you tell us a little bit about how the people listening to this can connect with you and work with you inside of your container?
Yeah. So right now I have a wide array of offerings, but what I'm focusing on right now is my Intuition 101 self-paced course. So this is a 9-week course that, is recorded. You could do it at your own pace, and it really gives you the background of pretty much everything that I've learned in the last 2 years that I thought was super helpful to grow your intuition. It also provides exercises, meditations, activations, all of the things so that you feel confident in using your intuition, right? That you can navigate life easier, become more confident, all of these things. So, if you are interested in that, you could follow me on Instagram. My handle is the Queen of Wards, and you just go to the link in my bio. You could DM me any of the things. But otherwise, if you're just interested in getting readings, I do mediumship readings, I do tarot readings. There's a whole array of offerings within that. But just as some background on how my readings go, is I'm not someone where you come and I give you like the answer to the question, right? And those readers are great and they're needed. I go in and we're going in and figuring out, where your block is. What do you need to do after the session, right? I give a little bit of homework. I give a little bit of integration. It's almost like a little healing session. It's not just a reading. So if you're interested in something like that, it's so amazing, right? And a lot of people that come to me, they're going through relationship stuff. It's like, should I be with this person? I'm feeling this block. What's going on there? And we could get into that in the 30, 40 minutes that we have. So you could figure out, what are your next steps moving out of that. So if you're interested in readings, you could also go to my link in bio on my Instagram.
Yes, and all of her links are going to be in the show notes, you guys. So if you are feeling called to develop your intuition, click that link. If you're feeling called to book a reading with this incredible intuitive woman, click that link. It's all going to be in the show notes below. But I'm actually curious. So what are like the main things that people come to you to like for readings and stuff? What are they coming to you for?
Yeah, a lot of it is love. But it's usually like, what is my block with love? It's people who like can't find or a partner that, meets their expectations, or someone who's been in a relationship for a long time and is like, is this meant for me?
Yeah.
And like having those doubts. So like really exploring that and those shadows and bringing up maybe things that they're not thinking. And then really the other thing is like, am I on the right path? Like that's a question that I get like so often. Like, am I doing the right thing here? Should I take this job or that job? Stuff
Yeah.
like that. Or what is my purpose? That's like another thing. There's a lot of people who, are looking to make that switch, especially after COVID. So,
Yeah.
helping them navigate that a little bit easier.
Yeah. Beautiful. So cool. Okay. What I would love for you to do now is I would love for you to share what your experience was like inside of the Embodied Coach. And yeah, just speak to what it was like for you, maybe some results that you experienced. Maybe speak about what it's like to work with me because I'm a unique coach, y'all. So I would love to hear that part for you.
Yeah. So I guess to start, I signed up for the Embody Coach. So we weren't in each other's worlds at all. My coach had introduced me to you and just said, "Hey, I think you should sign up for this," right? Because I wanted to take my business to the next level. I wanted that support. So, if Jess says to do something, I'm like, okay, I'm doing it. She hasn't led me wrong yet. So I basically signed up like within a week of following you. And I was so amped. I was like, we're going to grow this business. It's going to be fucking awesome. All this stuff. So I was expecting that. Things that I didn't expect in the Embody Coach is how much it helped me just like personally, right? Because we had those one-on-ones and I was going through a lot during those 3 months that we were together. And the support and the clearing and the activations that happened on a personal side of things was something that I hadn't expected and was very pleasantly surprised by, right? I think it was like every call we had, I was like, yeah, I don't have any business questions, but I'm dealing with this bullshit right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And to speak to that too, it's like, you guys, your personal life is your business, like it's really hard to compartmentalize the two. And so like if we got to address the personal life, like we're going to go there because that's most likely blocking you some way in your business.
Mhm.
Right. So I'm so happy you spoke to that. It's like, yeah, I'll never forget one testimony I'll receive was like, you teach you how to win in business, but you also teach how to win at life. And I'm like, yes.
Mm. Yes, exactly. So I think that was um the most unseen benefit to the embodied coach. And then just alternatively, like the business stuff, I loved our calls, and there's so much good information in there, but I really used our calls as like an activation, right? So you probably saw me, I was like typing things, I was like writing down ideas. You had mentioned something and I'd be like, I need to make all these Instagram posts. Like everything was just coming through. And it was so nice to have that time dedicated each week to like really focus on my business and brainstorm. And it's like, oh, I didn't think about that. Bring that in there. And I think just like so many ideas and came through, and like my business transformed, right? I was really focusing on readings, all of these things, and I was really resisting teaching intuition. Like before we had even met, I was like, no, I've only been doing this for 2 years, and who am I to teach anyone? And during that, I was like, you know what? I think I'm ready to do this.
Yes. Yeah. And I feel like that was also like an unsaid thing. It was just like an energy activation. You're like, okay, I'm ready. And I tend to do that, you guys. So if you're like fearing something, just being inside of these containers, I will activate that in you. It's not always said, but like something somewhere you're able to like overcome that initial fear of like, who am I? And you're
Hmm.
going to believe in yourself so fucking fully.
Yes, yes, exactly. And
Mm.
then the last thing that I just loved about the Embodied Coach was the community. Like the group of women that we had was incredible. And it was so great to just learn from other people, right? Like Lauren's doing online courses. So I like hopped on her webinar and was like, this is how I do an online course now, right? And it all just like lines up. So to see people in like such different like walks come together was amazing, and to see the different perspectives.
Yeah. It's like it's a thriving ecosystem. It really is. Like she said, one of the embodied coaches, Lauren, she hosted a free masterclass on creating online courses, and like boom, like now you have a new connection where you get to learn that. Like there's just so much magic that can happen inside of a community of women who genuinely want each other to win. And it is that thriving ecosystem where there's opportunity everywhere to learn from each other, to connect with each other, to send each other referrals, to learn from one another, like get readings from each other, like there's just so much available inside of being in community. Um, I love that part of the embodied coach too. That's probably like number one.
Yeah. Yeah. It was great to have that support system, definitely.
Well, thank you so much. It was so beautiful. Love that. I'm so proud of you and everything that you're creating. You should be so freaking proud of yourself. I mean, just witnessing you continuing to show up and grow and evolve and change lives is so powerful. And you guys, seriously, go follow Kathryn on Instagram because her content is so good. Like if you are like, wanting to know like what is you do like the numbers, right? Like this is what this often means.
Yeah.
Like it's just so helpful and so powerful and reaffirming. So definitely go follow her and give her some love. Is there any last lingering words of wisdom that you would love to share with the embodied woman today?
The only thing I want to share is, and I actually wrote this in my notes last night when I was thinking about this podcast, is be grounded in love. Like that was a message that came through, right? We're talking about like the fear that's driving us away from things. And what's the opposite of fear? It's love. So like be grounded in that as you continue on.
Mic drop. What a way to end the show. Wow. Ground yourself back into love. I love that so much. Kathryn, thank you so much. This is such a pleasure. You guys, if you enjoyed this episode, again, make sure you connect with Kathryn. If you know someone who's trying to develop their intuition, also connect them with Kathryn and send them this episode. I love you so freaking much. And I'm so freaking happy that you guys are listening to this. And I'll see you next episode.